Professionally, when you really understand the why in your life, it helps you to be more focused. It helps you to understand where you need to go to be successful. And finally, it's the financial success. So after you have all these answers, it really kind of will allow you to understand the basis for you to improve your finances, because you looked at all the reasons that why things are going bad, and just naturally your finances should improve as you repair all of these issues in your life. Hey, everybody, this is Dr. Dave and my guest host, Sarah, my marketing director. We've had some really fun topics that we discussed when we're talking about making that change. And, it's really important for me, for everybody that listens to this podcast, to start making these changes so you can see the result, especially after 90 days. Our last podcast, we discussed several different things as far as discipline goes. We've spoken about habits, so many different topics when we talk about really making that change. Today, I thought it might be a little bit important to talk about the why. And everybody has their own why. And what I mean by finding your why is it important for you to make these changes in your life now? What's the reason these changes are important to you? What's the why that you want to have for the rest of your life? I mean, there's a lot of different components to this why, right? I thought it was important. Maybe there's a way that we can help people to find the why so they can use it to their benefit. I always think looking inside yourself is really important. So I thought we could talk about looking at your biggest struggles. Sometimes that's really difficult to look at the things that have happened in our lives. And the other thing I thought would be great is to discuss the lessons that you've learned from your struggle. And lastly, using the lessons that we've learned and applying that to our lives so we can change our actions and behaviors. All of these factors of the why are in every aspect of our lives. When we have our spiritual journey, there's always that question, why, when you're talking about your spiritual life. Why did this happen to me? Why can't I do this? Why don't I have enough money? But the question isn't always just why. It's what are we learning from the reasons behind that why? That higher power can really help you to understand the why. The other component to this why is your health. Because if you're not settled with your mind, you continue to be destructive to yourself. You don't identify with your why, you're going to always be lost. You're never going to have that solution that we're looking for to make this change. And if you don't have that, it's really important to understand the implications of stress on your health. Next is the community that we surround ourselves with. If you have that great community of loved ones and support systems, it really makes a big difference at how you're able to deal with these issues and how you come through on the other end. Professionally, when you really understand the why in your life, it helps you to be more focused. It helps you to understand where you need to go to be successful. And finally, it's the financial success. So after you have all these answers, it really kind of will allow you to understand the basis for you to improve your finances, because you looked at all the reasons that why things are going bad, and just naturally your finances should improve as you repair all of these issues in your life. So first, I think we'll talk about the biggest struggles in our lives, and everybody has struggles. I'm a big listener of Joel Osteen. I know a lot of people don't like him, but I find his sermons to be very positive. And, he talks about in your life, stop being a victim and be a victor. And I love that term, because the struggles that we have in our lives define us. because after every struggle that we go through, there's a blessing on the other side. But you really need to understand the reason why this struggle impacts you so much. For myself, one of the biggest challenges I had in my life when I had my injury, when I was playing semi-pro football, right? I mean, that's pretty huge, right? It's changed my whole life course, right? Simple sports injury, not life ending, didn't make me walk different for the rest of my life, when I hurt my knee, but it did change the entire trajectory of my life. So although it was a big issue in my life at the time, I was able to deal with it. I was able to adapt to it, and it changed the whole direction of my life. And I used it as a stepping stone to really make these changes in my life. And that was just one. Because of that, I went to medical school. Another challenge that I had in my life was losing my parents. I know I'm not the only person that lost their parents in lives. We all will eventually, right? And that really shook me. My father went first and my mother a year and a half later. I'm married for 49 years, so always used to seeing them together, and it really impacted me a lot, losing my parents. Now I'm an orphan. I continue to be an orphan, even though I'm loved by many people and even their parents, and they've kind of taken me in. But it's not the same. It's not my parents. But again, something to help me get stronger, persevere, and adapt. So Sarah, I know that you've had some struggles in your life. We spoke about your medical struggles. Obviously, you're divorced. You've been through relationship struggles. What about any other struggles that you might have had in your life that have really helped to impact, where you're going?
I think just the day-to-day struggles of, staying motivated, balancing being a parent, a good parent, work, taking care of myself, prioritizing self-care. Just daily struggles for me are kind of what I'm working on now.
Right. And I think that's really important, right? Because you don't always need to fix the big struggle, right? Not everything is grand. It's not like you're losing your apartment. It's these little fine-tuning struggles that really make a difference in your life sometimes. It really makes a difference on how you're going to look at the day. Like you said, just being a good mom, being a good parent, it's a struggle. It's definitely a struggle. That's definitely a way that you need to kind of balance your thoughts and direct you in the right direction. Another thing that I'd like to really talk about, and this one is really difficult because you have to look at the struggles in your life to identify what those lessons are, right? That we need to learn. Like, for instance, my struggle of tearing up my knee and not playing football anymore. The lesson that I learned was you need to have more options. You need to be realistic, and you need to have another plan. There's been a lot of things that have happened in my life that first is the struggle, then is the lesson learned, and then you move on to the next part, which is using those lessons to make the change. I spoke about my football, other changes that have really made a big difference in my life. Like I said, was losing my parents. And the lesson that I learned from that is how much my parents really loved me, how special that love was. I mean, we don't have a lot of families today that their parents are married for 49 years, right?
Right. No,
that was really special to me. And losing both of them in a short period of time kind of left me wandering around, like feeling like a little adopted child. Very difficult. It's funny because I didn't even realize it, but at that time, first when my father passed away, I had some patients that also had some family members in the hospital. And I was able to use my pain to help my patients get through their issue with their relative in the hospital. Then I lost my mom. And then that entire week, and I'll never forget it, that entire week I had several patients with issues with their parents. I think I had 2 patients that also lost one of their parents. And man, did it impact me. But I had the perfect words to say to make them feel better. I knew when to hug them. I'm a big hugger. COVID destroyed me because no one could hug with COVID. But, at that time, this was before COVID, and it was very important to make sure that these people knew that they were loved when they were going through this struggle of losing their parents. So it really is important to learn your lessons from your struggles. Your struggles define your glory for you. They help all the tests help you to develop your testimony, right? You talked about some of your little struggles. I know you had some bigger struggles. You might not want to get into it on air, right? But what about the lessons that you've learned from some of your struggles? So maybe give me one struggle that you've had. You really learned a lot about yourself.
I think just being more present was a struggle that I'm still working on. But, I have 3 children. So my oldest now is going to be turning 27, and I have a 15-year-old. So I definitely, just because of youth and not knowing the things that I know now, I think I missed a lot of moments with her because I just wasn't present. I just was young and doing too many things. So now I've learned just, to be present with my son currently, who's 15. And that's something that I struggled with, but I've also kind of used my experience to make sure that that I'm present currently with him.
Yeah, that's a great lesson, actually.
Yeah.
It's always important to be around for your family and be present. And as parents, we kind of think, oh, well, I'm there. But it's the communication component. And I really think that holds true in any relationship that we have. We notice that the relationships are just not as strong when you don't communicate and if you don't communicate well. That's usually not a problem of mine. I'm a very good talker and I can communicate my thoughts well. Doesn't mean I come with the right solutions or the right lessons learned, but I've made a lot of mistakes in my life, and I'm sure we all do. And it's important to be able to know that you can get through those mistakes. And that's what our past teaches us is these mistakes. Got to look back at them and try to figure out how to use that as a positive. My son had a wrestling match this weekend, and he had one last weekend. And last weekend, he lost one match out of 3. And as a result, he lost that one match, but he was still eligible to go to regionals, which was yesterday. So he was all excited. And then after practice this week, I said, well, did your coach go over anything that you might have done wrong in your last match? He's like, no. So we had practice and didn't really learn much. And then the match came on yesterday and he lost. Now, how do I tell my son to learn from your lesson if they never gave him that education, right?
Yeah.
So, I still have to encourage him and say, don't worry, next year you'll do better. And now you have this experience that you could remember all the way up until next season. And I hope that he's able to do that. And he has that fire that burns in his side so he never has to feel that feeling again. But obviously, wrestling is a one-on-one sport. Unless you're best in your weight class around the country, you're going to have that losing feeling again. Sometimes these lessons might not be that big, but you still need to adjust and adapt and learn from it, because even small struggles can give big lessons. So the next component I want to talk about is using these lessons that you learned to really change your behaviors. But what I've noticed is by not changing your behaviors, you're going to get stuck in that same place. So you need to make a change. You're not going to fix your problem unless you change. You got to make that action. And by learning from your mistakes, your change might be a little bit more accurate, adapted in a adaptable way that you can really benefit from this challenge that you had. So for myself, my challenge was losing the ability to play football. The lesson that I learned from that is not to rely on my body, rely on my mind. And as a result, I'm a physician. How did it change my behavior? Well, I stopped being an athlete and became book smart, became a book nerd.
Yeah.
You've done the same thing with trying to get your body in shape after being diagnosed with Crohn's disease, and it allowed you the lessons you learned. So your problem was Crohn's. Your lessons that you learned was how to diet, it's how to eat properly. And now you're able to go into fitness shows. I mean, what a transition is that, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
You've also had changes in your marriage, like you said, that, you're no longer married. That's a big change, right? So that's a struggle in itself, because you get financial help and you get support. Sometimes all these things in the marriage, it's supposed to be that way, but you might not get that. But then what lessons did you learn from the divorce and having to bring up kids on your own?
Oh, so many. A lot of lessons. I mean, I've been divorced for quite a number of years now. So I think just knowing that I can overcome anything that's put before me.
It's not an easy thing, right? To kind of look at yourself on the inside and try to figure out what happened. A lot of times we blame ourselves, even if it's somebody else's fault. But sometimes we don't look at ourselves enough. And I think that's really important when we talk about struggles and lessons and as a resultant actions. I mean, if you're not honest with yourself about making a change and you're not honest with yourself about what these struggles are and what the lessons learned are, then you won't be able to change your behaviors. And if you don't change your behaviors, your life's not going to change. And the whole part about this podcast is to make you able to make that change so you can live the best life possible. We've definitely spoke about some important characteristics of defining your why. And once we have that, it enables us to see the lessons and then what did we learn from that, right? So, and how did we change our lives because of that? So first we looked at the biggest struggles in our lives, and there could be so many. I mean, we just stopped it, right? But I mean, there's struggle after struggle, right? But we're talking about biggest struggles, life-changing events. You know, I have a 23-year-old daughter, and that whole relationship was a struggle with her mom. You know, now we get along really great, but, you know, as a child, it was really difficult for my daughter. But I learned, my learning from that was it's important to have a relationship with your child's mom, even if you don't have a relationship with your child's mom, because the only one that gets hurt is the child. Look at your biggest struggles. We discussed a lot of struggles. And then the lessons learned, well, it's really hard to be specific on lessons learned without a specific problem in the first place. So in general, by making these mistakes or causing these problems or living through a problem, that's going to lead you to the next part of how am I really supposed to learn from this? That's really difficult sometimes because you have to eat your pride. Not everybody is able to eat their pride. You need to learn from your mistakes. There is nobody successful in this world that did not learn from his mistakes. Once you learn that and acquire the knowledge from your mistakes, you're able to make those changes and put them into actions. And then you'll see how your actions and your behaviors change, because you'll have a better outlook, because you know the reason why you're doing these things. You know the result, what it should be, and you're going to make them happen, because this is a limitless life that we have. There are no restrictions on what we do and what we want to do. So just follow those lessons. All right. So we looked at those three. So today, I think we can give some good homework on this one. So why don't we look at 3 challenges that you've had in your life? And then on one of our coaching calls, we can move that on to how is this struggle going to shape your understanding. You really need to go into every concept of your struggle to find out what lessons you need to learn, because it's not always evident when you have this struggle of what the lessons are, because sometimes it's just too painful to think about. And then lastly, so that's number 1 is looking at your biggest struggle for your homework. And number 2 is understanding the lessons that you've learned. And then the third part is now you got these lessons that you've learned. Now you got to put those lessons into action. We're all about change. And if you don't put those lessons into action, you're going to be stuck in the same place you were before. So let's forget about being stuck and go make that change, because the change is what gets you to that next level. So thank you, Sarah. You're a great co-host as usual.
Thank you.
I hope these issues were not too invasive for you. I think it's important for people to know that it's not just them going through these struggles. It's everyone together. All have our own struggles and we all face them differently. But our job is to help to make that change so you can change your life. So come join us next week. This is Dr. Dave and Sarah.